Jane Seymour is remembered as Henry VIII's most beloved queen. The quiet, gentle woman who replaced Anne Boleyn just days after her execution, and the mother of Edward VI, Henry VIII's only spoiled son. But was that the whole truth? Queen Jane Seymour had a cold dark side, a frightening dark side, a story filled with triumph, tragedy, and calculation. The price she paid for Henry's words while she was giving birth was completely unintentional. Let's begin. Jane's story began at court around 1529. At that time, the relationship between Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, had nearly crumbled. The main reason? Catherine couldn't give Henry a healthy male heir. In the Tudor world, a son wasn't just personal joy. He was the pillar of the dynasty, ensuring stability for an empire still fragile after civil war. Jane Seymour was brought into court as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon when she was still very young, perhaps in her late teens or early 20s. The Seymour family was respectable, even tracing their lineage back to King Edward III. However, they weren't part of England's highest aristocracy, so no one could have imagined that one of their daughters, a young lady-in-waiting, could one day become Queen of England. It would be romantic to say King Henry fell in love with Jane at first sight, but that's absolutely not what happened. In Jane's early years at court, Henry was genuinely infatuated with Anne Boleyn, the captivating woman for whom Henry was willing to break with the Roman Catholic Church and marry in 1533. Jane simply waited patiently in the shadow of both Catherine and Anne. When Catherine was deposed, Jane seamlessly transitioned to the position of lady-in-waiting for the new queen, Anne Boleyn. What does this tell us about Jane? Was it just obedience and adaptability? Or did it show shrewdness and remarkable survival skills in a court environment rife with danger and intrigue? In terms of personality, where Anne Boleyn was dark, mysterious, and strong-willed, Jane was described by courtiers as calm and sweet. One courtier even called her the gentlest woman I ever knew. With her serene presence at court, she was even nicknamed Pacific, meaning peacemaker or peaceful. This is the popular view of Jane Seymour, a gentle woman who brought purity back to the court after the turmoil caused by Anne. But don't judge a queen by her nickname. Jane knew how to survive and thrive in Henry's brutal court. Although she didn't have the advanced education or deep learning of Catherine of Aragon or Anne Boleyn, Jane was very shrewd and possessed formidable strategic ability. Henry's friends, like Sir John Russell, called her the prettiest of the king's wives. Jane Seymour's path to the throne was a story filled with tension and calculation. Initially, Henry was infatuated with Anne Boleyn, but the good days didn't last. Like Catherine before her, Anne failed to produce a male heir. Soon enough, the king's gaze, always fixated on securing the Tudor dynasty, shifted. And this time, the one who caught his eye was Jane Seymour. Clearly, he liked what he saw, and by 1536, everyone at court knew the king was pursuing her. Things were about to get very complicated, and Anne's position, despite being pregnant again in January 1536, began to shake violently. There's a theory that Henry had started noticing Jane as early as October 1534. Ambassador Chapuis wrote that the king was attached to an unnamed young woman who supported Princess Mary, Catherine of Aragon's daughter. Barrett L. Beer suggests this could only have been Jane. However, other authors are more skeptical, as this relationship seemed to be kept quiet for quite some time afterward. What is certain is that Henry visited the Seymour family at Wolf Hall in October 1535. While we don't know if that was when his attention to Jane became romantic, late 1535 or early 1536 seems a more likely time for the start of their relationship. Anne Boleyn certainly complained that she was heartbroken because she saw that he loved another in late January 1536. Jane Seymour's name first appeared in Chapuis' letter on February 17th, although he misspelled it as Mistress Semmel. News leaked beyond the court to the point where Henry had to warn Jane about a pamphlet ridiculing their relationship that was circulating. In a letter to Jane, he called her "my darling servant and mistress," promised to punish the slanderer, and hoped to soon welcome you into these arms. Surprisingly, the author of that song was never discovered. To pursue Jane, Henry bathed her in expensive gifts and jewelry, completely behind Anne Boleyn's back. One of those gifts was a beautifully crafted locket necklace, inside of which was a portrait of Henry himself. How discreet. This is a specific, vivid detail that helps the audience visualize this pursuit. Jane might have looked sweet on the outside, but she knew exactly how to hit the weak point. One day, she deliberately began opening and closing that locket right in front of Anne. Imagine the scene. Anne, pregnant, surely knew about her husband's relationship with her lady-in-waiting and saw Henry's image around Jane's neck. Anne's reaction was absolutely not calm at all. She yanked the locket so hard from Jane's neck that she broke the chain with such force that her finger actually bled from the effort. Ironically, Henry had once given Anne a bracelet with his portrait inside when they were courting. It's no surprise seeing a similar gift given to someone else sent Anne into a fury. The anger and stress are said to have caused Anne to miscarry in late January 1536. From here, everything happened very quickly. Catherine of Aragon died on January 7th, removing a major legal obstacle for Henry. Anne's miscarriage on the 29th of the same month extinguished Henry's hope in this second wife for bearing a son. Everyone at court, including Jane, knew this was likely the end for Anne. Many stories even suggest Jane played a very active role in Anne's downfall. According to one story, Anne walked into a room one afternoon and witnessed Jane casually sitting on Henry's lap. This scene caused a fierce argument between Henry and Anne blamed the miscarriage on their actions, calling Jane a wanton woman. Another story from Jane Dormer's memoirs says Anne and Jane wrestled and fought over the relationship. Thomas Fuller says Anne grabbed the locket from Jane's neck, injuring her hand. Chapuis also reported another incident in late March 1536, just weeks before Anne was arrested. Henry sent Jane a purse full of gold and a letter. Jane, after kissing the letter respectfully, returned it to the messenger without opening it. She knelt and begged the messenger to tell the king that she was an honorable girl, who valued her honor above any treasure in the world and would never lose it. She asked the king to keep the gift until God was pleased to send her a favorable marriage. Looking generously, one could say Jane was trying to distance herself from Henry, but Chapuis didn't think so. This was exactly the tactic Anne Boleyn had used nearly a decade earlier, refusing to be a mistress and only accepting marriage. And once again, this tactic worked. Chapuis was informed by his sources that, due to this refusal, the king's love for that girl increased considerably. Henry said he praised Jane's virtuous behavior, and to prove his honest intentions, he would not speak to her privately anymore unless one of her relatives was present. So, Henry arranged for Jane to go to a room in Secretary Cromwell's apartment at the palace, where her eldest brother and his wife were staying, with the clear purpose of having her there. She was not as meek and devout as she presented herself. Her family could only be pleased with this advancement, as it elevated them. By early May 1536, Anne's fate was almost sealed. She was arrested on May 2nd, along with her brother and several others. They were charged with treason and adultery. After what was considered a staged trial on May 17th, Anne was also found guilty and sentenced to death. She was executed on May 19th. Throughout this time, Jane was taken to safe locations and was very well served, dressed lavishly like a future queen. Immediately after Anne's death, Henry visited Jane. The path to the throne was clear, and Henry wasted no time. They didn't even wait for Anne's body to cool. The new couple was betrothed on May 20th, 1536, right after Anne Boleyn's execution. They were officially married the next day. They needed a dispensation from Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, as they were fifth cousins. The dispensation even noted that it is clear that one of Henry's mistresses at some point must have been Jane's second cousin. The speed at which all this happened was neither unnoticed nor well received by everyone. On the same day of the betrothal, Chapuis wrote that people have begun to murmur suspicion, and some assert that long before the other woman died there was already some arrangement made which sounds ill in the ears of the people. Even the unpopular Anne received some sympathy for being treated so cruelly. Nevertheless, the wedding took place at Whitehall Palace on May 30th. Henry publicly presented his new wife 10 days later. Sir John Russell wrote that Henry was delivered from hell to heaven. The marriage was quiet and private. Jane was introduced at court during the Whitsuntide festival, and Londoners first saw the new Queen in June when she began accompanying Henry to official events. She chose the motto, "Bound to obey and serve." This was a stark contrast to one of Anne's mottos, "This is how it will be. Let them grumble." This shows the very different attitudes of the two women towards the role of Queen and how they wanted to present themselves publicly. Anne's falcon badge was also quickly replaced. On the outside, she seemed completely gentle and sweet. Jane was very popular with the common people. The public saw in her a return to the purity that Henry's first wife had represented. She was far from the notorious and widely disliked world of Anne Boleyn. As mentioned, an important reason Henry married Jane might not just have been her personality or beauty, which was judged differently, but the hope of fertility from her large family. Despite her noble birth, Jane's rank was lower than both Catherine and Anne. Her education was more modest. She issued decrees that her ladies-in-waiting must adhere to strict rules of conduct. They must be chaste and only think about serving God and becoming virtuous. This was a very shrewd move from someone who had been a lady-in-waiting before becoming a mistress. Marrying Henry VIII brought significant benefits. After the wedding, Henry granted Jane 104 manors across 4 counties and a lot of forest land. She understood her duty was to please King Henry in the bedroom and then the birthing chamber. The early period of Henry and Jane's marriage was primarily royal progresses. They also planned a coronation for Jane, just like Henry's first 2 wives. However, an outbreak of plague temporarily postponed the event, and in the end, Jane would never have a coronation. However, the most significant difference Jane showed compared to her predecessors was in her childbearing record. Amidst the turmoil from the pilgrimage of grace, Jane experienced both loss and great gain. About half a year after the wedding, she became pregnant. Unfortunately, she miscarried, but Jane had an iron and steel will. She wasted no time and went back to bed with Henry. Less than a month later, she was pregnant again. This time it would change history. Being the wife of King Henry VIII was a dangerous job, and Jane worked hard to keep that job. One day, Henry put her in her place with a cruel remark. Sources differ on what she pleaded for. Some say a pardon, some say restoring monasteries. Whatever it was, Henry flew into a rage and reminded her of Anne Boleyn's fate for trying to interfere in his affairs. It was a cold warning, a testament to Henry's potential cruelty. Henry was absolutely determined not to have another miscarriage. He had Jane withdrawn from all public duties in the summer of 1537, forcing her into an existence of extreme solitude during her pregnancy. By September, she was fully confined. One of Jane's physical characteristics was ghastly pale skin. While considered the height of Tudor beauty, this trait could also have a dangerous side. Modern historians speculate that she suffered from anemia, a lack of iron in her blood. This could make childbirth incredibly dangerous for her health. She was probably not healthy enough to give birth, but couldn't stop. Jane began labor in early October 1537, but things did not go smoothly. Historians believe the baby was in an unusual position. The labor was a terrifying and agonizing experience. Jane had to push continuously for 2 days and 3 nights, all the while knowing she might be drawing her last breath. This was a moment of extreme climax, full of tension and emotion. During this difficult labor, doctors were worried they would have to choose between saving the baby and saving the mother. According to one report, when the attendants asked the king what he wanted done, his answer was totally heartless. "If both could not be saved, at least let the child live," he said. And then, an even colder remark, "For wives were easy to be found." This is one of the most shocking details about Henry VIII and the fragile position of women in his reign. At 2 a.m. on October 12, 1537, after hours of agony, Jane Seymour finally gave birth. To Henry's supreme joy, it was a healthy boy. Henry and Jane named the child Edward VI. A son, a male heir, had been born. In the moments right after Edward's birth, nothing seemed wrong. Jane was still signing letters the evening after birth. On October 15th, she was even receiving visitors and sitting up in bed. But soon after, things began to go downhill. On the 16th, just days after giving birth, reports describe Jane experiencing a flux which may have been postpartum hemorrhage or diarrhea. 16th century medicine was very rudimentary, making it difficult to assess exactly what happened. A scandalous rumor spread throughout the court, a terrifying hypothesis about her death. Many believed that in his desperation to extract a son from Jane's weakened body, Henry ordered a caesarean section on the Queen. This was a procedure that at the time was certainly a death sentence for the mother. This is a controversial hypothesis, worth analysing different perspectives. On Friday, October 19th, Jane was incredibly weak. Her health only declined throughout the weekend. By Monday, her attendants knew she was in critical condition. King Henry rushed to her bedside. The night after that was their final farewell. Even at the time, many theories attempted to explain Jane's illness. The most convincing evidence comes from a report from her own time. That document states that she caught a cold and was unable to keep down proper food. According to Tudor expert Alison Weir, this could stem from food poisoning, leading to particular attention paid to the type of food Seymour was eating. For the cold, Weir suggests a more complex explanation. It could be a sign of a blood clot flowing from the heart, embolism, especially if Jane was already weak and vomiting due to food poisoning. Whatever the true cause, the end was near. On October 24th, 1537, Jane Seymour died in her bed at 2 a.m. Almost the same time she had given birth to her son just days before. Jane was 29 years old. She had been Queen of England for less than 2 years. Jane Seymour's funeral was held at Windsor Castle on November 12, 1537. During the ceremony, her beloved stepdaughter Mary served as the chief mourner. Henry did his best to honour the wife who had given him a son. There were 29 followers in the procession, one for each year of her short life. Henry was never the same after her death, mentally or physically. After Jane passed away, Henry became morose, gained weight, suffered from diabetes and gout. He became the obese, erratic king we know today. Henry was so grief-stricken by Jane's death that he was hardly able to cope. For the first time in his life, he genuinely mourned a wife. Henry wore black for 3 months, a record for him. He even postponed marriage for 2 years after Jane died. Many historians speculate that among Henry's many wives, Jane Seymour was always his absolute favourite. But why? Was it because of her gentle character, or simply because she gave him a male heir? It took a decade for Henry to express his most poignant tribute. When he died in 1547, almost exactly 10 years after Jane's death, his final wish was to be buried beside her. For Henry, Jane was always his true queen. Was Henry's sentiment towards Jane true love, or just gratitude for the heir she provided him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.